Let's go ahead and open up After Effects for the first time. Now, I'm kind of new to After Effects as well. The Adobe Suite, I have a lot of practice in Photoshop and Illustrator, Premiere, programs like that. I was new to After Effects, and man, it's really blowing me away the kind of stuff you can get done in After Effects. So I'm kind of learning along with you, and it's getting me really excited. So here are all the control panels. At first, it'll look a little bit intimidating, particularly if you haven't really done video editing before, but don't worry, I'm going to walk you all through it. So the first thing that we'll do is just hit Command-I on the keyboard, and that's to import new material. And so here I am in my isolation folder, and the first thing I'll import is streetsign.mov. So that's the film that I took on my phone. I'm also going to bring in stopsign.psd, so we'll bring those two in at the same time. And they're going to show up over here ready to go. So it's one of the cool things about the Adobe ecosystem. I know I sound like a fanboy right now, but Photoshop talks to After Effects and so forth, which is nice. Okay, step one, we will take streetsign.mov or whatever your video is called, and we'll drag it down here to the bottom left. And then we can start working here on our layers. So just like Photoshop and Illustrator, After Effects has layers. That shows us a preview of the clip that we have selected. And then over here on the right, we get the timeline. So I can scrub back and forth in the timeline and see the video go back and forth. Sometimes you'll get this adaptive resolution notice, which is just a way to keep the computer from having to work so hard every moment. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is to come in here and track the motion of this sign. It's certainly possible, and in the old days, this is what you would have done, right? If you wanted to replace that sign, you'd bring in a file, and then frame by frame, you'd move your new file around so that it appeared to be, placed in the scene. But now this process is largely automated. To prepare for the process, we'll go up to Layer, New, and then we're going to add something called a null object. And so by null, it just means nothing. Okay, so what we have done here is a layer that contains nothing at all. I'll right-click it and rename it just for my own organization, and then call this the tracking layer. Okay, so once that's done, click back on my streetsign.mov, and then over on the right-hand side, if I scroll down, you should see a whole bunch of little collapsible menus. So I had effects and presets opened up, but I want to get down here to Tracker. Okay, let's open up Tracker. And there's a couple of options you have to select. So we're going to track motion. The source of the motion will be streetsign.mov, and that populated because I already had it clicked. It's going to call this tracker number 1. The type of tracking will be transformation. So you can do other stuff in here, like you could stabilize shaky footage if you don't want it to shake anymore. But I think we'll sell the illusion better if our footage stays shaky. So we're just going to track its transformation, right? How it kind of slides around the screen. It's also possible within transformation to track its rotation and other sorts of things, but we're not going to really worry about all that, so we'll just say transform. It's automatically understood the tracking layer will be the target of the motion, but if it didn't know that, or for some reason you need to change it, you can edit it here. And then finally we go down to analyze. I don't think it matters, but oh wait, it does matter, right? So I'll pull my timeline marker all the way to the left-hand side here, and then I'll zoom in, and you'll see that it's given me this little neutral tracking point. So that's the part on the screen that's going to be looking at to figure out where the tracking takes place. And right now that's largely white on white. So I want to take this whole thing and I want to move it over until we get something that has a nice amount of contrast, like this bolt right here. If you want, you can make this area a little bigger, although frankly I don't really understand the difference between a big and a small area. But I'm going to make sure that box, maybe out of superstition, just encompasses that bolt, and then we'll hit play. So depending on the speed of your computer, this can take some time. You can see it's definitely not as fast as just playing a regular video, but it's doing a pretty good job tracking that thing. If you look at it really carefully, you can see that the box does appear to slide around ever so slightly. So it's not perfect, but again, we could go back and change that later. Okay, so once that's all done, you'll get to see like a little snake that sort of shows you the path of the track over time. And you would think that you've completed the action, but you actually have to hit apply. And then in this case, we're interested in tracking both X and Y at the same time. So X and Y, okay. So once that's done, a whole bunch of stuff will pop up down here. So you can see underneath streetsign.mov, you've got motion trackers, tracker 1, track point, and on and on and on. So I'll just collapse that down. And if I open up the tracking layer and open up transform, you can see that those points have been added in there too. But because it's a null layer, nothing's going to happen if I play this. You might see this little red box kind of float around, but that's not really what we're interested in. So what makes this really powerful now is that we bring in stopsign.psd. So I'm going to pull that down onto the top, and initially it's just going to kind of sit wherever it wants to sit. And I can drag this thing around until it's kind of correctly positioned on top of the sign. I need to drag it down a little bit so it covers everything well. And if I zoom in, I can also see that maybe there's just an ever so slight rotation. So to accomplish that, I would open up the transform commands here in the layer, go to rotation, and then hold down my mouse and just kind of drag this back and forth until I get just a slight rotation, maybe something like that. So what I'm looking at here is I want those bolts to line up right in the center. I want the rest of the sign to be totally covered. You can see it's peeking out at the top ever so slightly. Whoops, I just moved the background there. So we want our stop sign. We will scoot our stop sign up a little bit, and then I'll zoom back out. Sometimes when you're zoomed in, it makes the program take a lot longer to render things out, so zooming out kind of gives it an easier time. Okay, now if I were to play this right now, you would see that the stop sign is not yet attached to that motion data. So the last thing we have to do is use this little icon, which is known as the pick whip. So you're going to use that whip, and you're going to drag it with the mouse down to the null layer. That's the tracking layer. So I do that. And once I've done that, we should be able to open up PSD and see that position data is starting to be inherited, but the way to really tell is just to go ahead and play it. And then we get something like that. So that's looking pretty good, right? I mean, this is an automated process. I did very little. I gave the sign a little bit of rotation. Of course, back in Photoshop, I had to do a really conscientious job of isolating this thing. And if you want, we can also take a look at some ways to make it look even better.